means that you're relying less on individual people to have to carry that burden and responsibility in the organization.
And yourself, right?
Exactly,
And
exactly. And we do it a lot, right? Like,
talking about how they felt guilty and bad about taking time off, and how some of them weren't taking time off because finance stuff, bills, invoices, stuff had to get paid.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, right? So it is like it does feel like a chicken versus, kind of chicken egg situation.
Yeah.
So it's like, where do you get the time and space? Welcome to our conversation today. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us again. Today, we're going to be focusing on tools and resources for running and managing your organization. In particular, we want to talk about why poor operations and infrastructure is wrecking your quality of life. I think this is one of those things, infrastructure, operations, these are the very kind of unsexy elements of running an organization or running a business. But it's really important to understand that, not focusing on your infrastructure and operations has, bigger ramifications, both for your organization, but also, as I said before, for your quality of life. So that's really what we're going to be talking about today, kind of exploring some of the impacts, right? And some solutions, right? Or we're going to kind of talk to you about some of the ways that, that we've done this work for our organizations or organizations that we've worked with.
Yeah.
So, basically we Cypher. That's our channel, that's our organization. And whether you're a seasoned executive suffering from burnout, trying to run your mission-centered business, or a new nonprofit founder wanting to tighten up your organization's ops, this is the community for you. We are Lina and Jodi, and we use our experience as a nonprofit CEO and HR professional to create regenerative spaces for leaders with marginalized identities to learn and grow together. We believe that you are as worthy and deserving of care as the communities that you serve. So welcome to the conversation. So interestingly, this topic, kind of was, this topic is related to some of the conversations that we started in previous videos. For those of you who have seen our other two videos, if you haven't, please feel free to go back and watch them.
Yeah.
But I was actually looking at another YouTube video, Rest as Resistance for Black Women. I've dropped that in the link. I've dropped a link to that video in the description. I saw a video that is not kind of expressly related to this topic, but really made me think about, kind of what we've been talking about over our last several videos. And if you haven't seen them, please feel free to go back and watch them. But I watched the video Rest as Resistance for Black Women by Latrice Kelly. A link to the video, you'll find a link to that video in the description. But really, a lot of what she's talking about has grown out of the Rest as Resistance movement started by Tricia Hersey, which is incredibly powerful work. So if you haven't, read her work or seen any of her videos, I strongly recommend that you do so. So this idea of rest as resistance, right? Like, what does that have to do with operations and infrastructure, right? Some folks may be wondering. Actually, it has a lot to do with operations and infrastructure when you are, it's in particular, I think when you're the leader of an organization. And, in particular, those of us who are doing kind of mission-centered work. So your infrastructure and your operations, what they really do is they systematize your processes and your information in the organization, which is important because what that means is when you have systems in place to really kind of hold down your information and processes, it means that you're relying less on individual people to have to carry that burden and responsibility in the organization.
And yourself, right?
Exactly,
And,
exactly. Yeah. And we do it a lot, right? Like, how often in organizations, especially when we're small, how often is it that we've got the one person, the one person who is the keeper of the knowledge or the keeper of the stuff. And we lean very heavily on that one individual or those couple individuals to kind of hold everything, right? When you when you do a good job of operationalizing, meaning kind of documenting your processes, put them down on paper, right? Identifying, tools and systems that can hold certain pieces of labor. What that does is it frees people up, right? And it also ensures that you are not as reliant on specific individuals being in place in order to carry
Mm-hmm.
out your work. Like, so think about the
Mm-hmm.
times when, some key person was out sick, right? Or when you're out sick, right? And
Yeah.
it feels like
Yeah.
chaos erupts
Yeah.
because, you're the person, or this other person or these other people are holding these very specific pieces to running the organization in their
Yeah.
heads, right? Which makes it very difficult then to pass on information, to
Yeah.
pass on processes, so that people are free to do things like take time off, right? To
Yeah.
take vacation
100%.
or
I've
get
had
sick.
one client that is coming to mind where um, all they're all in finance. It's like the finance team, and it's three of them, but it's a big organization. And they were talking about how they felt guilty and bad about taking time off,
Mm-hmm.
and how some of them weren't taking time off because finance stuff, bills, invoices, stuff had to get paid. And
Absolutely.
my heart just broke for them. So I'm like, hey, and it's not like they're not wanting good systems. They do, but they're
Mm-hmm.
also, again, mission critical, love their work, love their clients, love their community. And so they're just trying to make it work, man. Like they're just, but like you said, because they haven't been able to, or maybe haven't felt like they have allowed to, sometimes that can
Mm-hmm.
happen. And so not this case in particular, but perhaps we feel pressure and we don't take the time that's needed to build that infrastructure because someone's got to do the work. But
Absolutely.
it's like a catch
Absolutely.
22, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's the thing, right? So it is like it does feel like a chicken versus, kind of chicken egg
Yeah.
situation. So it's like, where do you get the time and space to sit down and, kind of write out or operationalize the things that are happening? Where do you have the time and the resource and capacity to create that database that
Yeah.
has all your partner relationships, rather than that single person holding all those relationships in their heads, right?
Yeah.
And that's, but the problem is when we don't do it, and I'm talking from experience, right? Like, I'm
Yeah.
talking from, as a person who, came into my position and there were 2 3/4 staff, right? To
Mhm.
now having, 10 staff and lots of consultants, right? Which is
Right.
it's a big leap. And, the ways in which we paid the price along the way, and I personally paid the price along the way, not doing it, right? Like,
Mm,
not kind of,
mm.
creating the time and space and prioritizing doing it has costs, right? Like, it's had human costs. And
Yeah.
those costs look like turnover, right? Like, those costs look like burnout. Those costs look like, as you
Mhm.
said, Jodi, me not taking time off because I feel
Yeah.
like, oh my God, if I take time off, who's going to do X, Y, Z? But that's really an infrastructure problem, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's
Well,
that's a
it's probably infrastructure and a bunch of other stuff. But I
yep,
love how you've done and how you're seeing the connection between this movement, this idea of rest and resistance, really for the individual. Like our hope is for the individual who's watching this video right now um, that with that rest can come many things. And in
mhm,
this case, rest can come if you've built in and have empowered others to build in the infrastructure that's needed. Um,
absolutely.
I'm not so familiar with the rest and resistance movement. Would you mind just speaking briefly about that? Because the words are kind of contradictory, right?
Well, and I think that's kind of the point, right? So
Yeah.
the whole idea behind it, and this is speaking, very specifically. Um, well, so part of this is about, recognizing the ways in which our kind of our a grind culture, right? Like a capitalistic, individualistic culture that really, you know, uh, encourages, not just encourages, but really kind of demands that people
Mm,
always be on the grind, right? Like, you're always supposed to be working. Like, I think all those times about all these commercials that are like, it's usually like a lot of athletes, right? It's like, somebody's running, running, running. You don't have time to be in pain. Take this drug, right? Like
Yeah,
somebody's at
fair
the
enough.
house, these kind
Sure.
of somebody's at the office and is like, you don't have time to be sick. Take this drug, right? It's like, nah, be sick. Like, got
Yeah.
down, right? Like, be in pain. So it's very much, we are part of this culture, that kind of says we must constantly be producing, right? Because
Hmm.
that's what it really boils down to, is
Yeah.
this idea
100%.
of constantly having to produce, constantly being on the grind, right? In ways
Yeah.
that completely strip of us of us, strip us of our humanity. So the
Yeah.
whole notion of rest as resistance, especially for Black folks, right, who've been commodified, who treated as chattel, treated as commodity, right? So this idea of is really uh, a way of challenging this kind of capitalistic structure and challenging this idea of always having to be on the grind, right?
Yeah, for
Always
sure.
having to be producing, always having to be,
Mm.
yeah, like I said, producing in order to be considered a
A
valuable.
value. Yeah, that's
Right.
exactly what I was thinking when you mentioned that.
Exactly.
And I
Exactly.
really
So yeah.
appreciate you mentioning the piece around identity and, in this case, for Black women. When I saw the title, and as you were explaining, what it means for you and how you've seen the concepts used, my thinking went to, what I continue to struggle with, but also, and try to I guess fight is, resistance, rest as a mom and as a woman,
Mhm.
and maybe yes, as a brown woman in my culture, in the Punjabi culture, and what that's looked like.
Yeah.
Um, and that it's resisting it all, right? And it's resisting it all because if I don't, um, if I'm not strategic, and in this case, bringing it back to infrastructure in my job, or and helping clients with figuring out infrastructure, if we all
Hmm.
don't do that, there is no rest. Um,
Exactly.
so I appreciate you honing in on that. It reminds me of, and I think I've used this quote before, Audre Lorde's quote about self care is self preservation.
Hmm.
Or she says she wrote something, or it's an essay, and I just think that reminded me of this rest and resistance piece.
Hmm.
Um, so, do we want to jump into a bit more around
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely.
okay.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
what's one of the things that you would describe as, a negative consequence to, not having good infrastructure or pieces or systems in place?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the main things, and as I said, this is something that I myself have seen and experienced in some of my different roles, is there's a real human cost, right?
Mm,
To having poor infrastructure in your organization, and that often looks like turnover,
yeah,
right? Just realistically, people just get tired. People get tired, people get frustrated. Often it can make people feel unappreciated. It can make it very difficult for you to even fully understand what's happening in the organization. It can make it difficult for you to understand what the needs are. It can
yeah,
make it difficult for you to even track, and demonstrate your success as an organization when you don't have the right infrastructure in place, right? So
yeah,
it's incredibly, incredibly critical, if you are, right, if you care about your staff, if you
yeah,
care
totally.
about the
Well, and I
organization.
think it's an important point where you talk about the metric of turnover, right? So, because I
Hmm.
know sometimes clients will struggle with, well, I know something's wrong. Like, where do I go to figure out what's not working, right? And sometimes when it's like money, it's obvious because you've either come
Hmm.
within budget or haven't, or your grant needs to be, you need to report money on a grant, so that's easy, it's numbers. But when it comes to metrics as it relates to the cost on the humans, the employees doing the work, I love that you mentioned the turnover because I've talked about that with clients. I'm like, okay, so
Hmm.
how much turnover are you having? When are you having it? Because it could be a seasonal thing. In which positions are you having it? And that can help, and that requires time, and sometimes is a pain in
Hmm.
the ass, right? But
Yep.
if you don't spend the time to do that, then, like you said, you're not going to be able to see what is frustrating your staff, right? What's going
Hmm.
on, and if you do that analyzing, you might discover it's because our systems suck. It's because they're having to weed through, I don't know, endless streams of paper just to pay an invoice or whatever it might be. Um, And so it ultimately, I think you had mentioned it before, it makes the employees' jobs harder.
Yeah, yeah. And also there's another piece to it too, right? Like there's another piece that I think is important. And I think I came to understand this when I was serving as interim executive director for another organization prior to my time with my present organization. And there is, especially for those folks who are leading organizations where you're working with um, folks who may have dealt with trauma, right? Because
Oh,
a lot of us may be running organizations where our team um, maybe are folks who are victims of violence. In particular, I was working with an organization where we supported commercially sexually trafficked youth, and a lot of my
mm,
team had survived being commercially sexually trafficked, right? So there was lots of trauma, lots
yeah,
and
for
lots of
sure.
trauma. And what I came to understand was that there were ways in which the systems and structure of the organization were simply reinforcing trauma, right?
Wow,
And
wow.
it's true, right? So as we were really doing the work of cleaning up systems, I
Mm,
also found it was really helpful for folks in terms of feeling held, right? And
mm,
really feeling kind of safe and protected in the work and in the work environment, right? So
yeah.
there are ways in which this is not just about spreadsheets, right? It's not just
No,
about
no.
databases. It's really not, right? Like this is really about, you know, it has real impacts, right?
Yeah.
There are lots of real impacts that this has on the human beings who are
Hmm.
doing the work, often really hard work, right?
Yes.
Often work that can be traumatizing work, often
Hmm.
work that can be triggering work, right? Depending on, those of us, as I said, those of us, doing mission center work, a lot of times, we're dealing with really hard stuff, right? And
Yeah,
our
right.
folks are dealing with
Absolutely.
really hard stuff. And
Yeah,
so these systems become a way to also take care of people as
right.
they're doing the work. And so that's also,
Yeah.
how I've really tried to start looking at it
Looking at it.
as your infrastructure is how you take care of the people who are doing this important work that needs to be
Yeah,
done.
yeah. So when you say that, it reminds me of a way to take care and eliminate, like sometimes the language in the federal government that gets used, or maybe in general, bureaucracy, right? Like let's get rid of the red tape. Let's get rid of, so let's make this more efficient, because if we don't, whether it's whether it's trauma that gets brought up over and over again because of the system or working through the system, but also like chronic stress. Like I'm wondering about
Mm-hmm.
that piece, that, if by when you provide systems that allow for some ease, the stress that your employees might be feeling or the trauma that they've lived that they're now reliving, could potentially be, not maybe eliminated, but just made better, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
then that's kind of what we're saying, right? So in a way, it's like making the visible like a spreadsheet, um, which is infrastructure, recognizing that visibility, like make it nice and clean and crisp. So we are talking about that stuff, but it's because
Mm-hmm.
the real stuff is the stuff that we don't always see, right? The
Right.
invisible, the care, the trauma that folks have felt, the stress that they're feeling. We only see that in turnover stats. But
Mm-hmm.
otherwise, you don't see it when it's happening, right? And that's what I think is heartbreaking, I think, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
you don't even see it in yourself, and as you said, as an ED, you might see it, you might not see it in yourself, and you might not see it in others, but you want to see it because you care. You care about yourself and you care
Mm-hmm.
about your staff. So that those 2 points around trauma, stress, the reduction of that, making employees' jobs easier. I guess a third point is, I think, what we're saying when it comes to why the infrastructure matters, why
Yep.
maybe this spreadsheet and not that spreadsheet matters. Like that's
Yep.
not, you know what I mean? Like, so that seems simplistic, but we're not trying to simplify. At the end of the day, we're not trying to simplify what this actually means, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, exactly, exactly. And that's the thing, right? And that's why I thought that this was an important way to kind of frame. I thought it was important to frame this conversation around operations and infrastructure a little bit differently,
Yeah,
because so often it is, the conversations tend to be very kind of mechanistic, you
sure.
know. And once again, I think that when that happens, it can make it seem like, right. So so it seems like when we just kind of keep it at this mechanistic level, and when you're trying to make decisions about where to put time and energy when there's limited time and energy, it can
Mm.
feel like, oh, that stupid spreadsheet can wait, right?
Yeah,
Because we've got a people to feed. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? We've got, children to take care of. We've got elderly people to take, so it feels like, oh, but these big issues we're dealing with, those stupid spreadsheets are irrelevant. It's just stupid bureaucracy, whatever. But no, it's not true, right? Like, because actually, and I'm talking
yeah.
about, I'm saying spreadsheets. We don't really use spreadsheets, right? Like,
No,
we
no, I
use
know, I
spreadsheets, we're talking about more in a minute.
know.
But, because honestly, using too many spreadsheets could be what's stressing people out. That's, like I said,
Mhm.
we'll talk about that more in a minute. But, it's actually, that spreadsheet could actually greatly improve your ability to do the work that you're doing in a
Yeah,
way that alleviates stress and stress from you as a leader, alleviate stress from your team, et cetera, which ultimately then means that your outputs are going to be better. And
yeah,
the work that you're
100%.
doing and the people that you're serving are going to benefit from that work, which means that it's
Yeah,
worthwhile, even
yep.
though it feels tedious. Trust me, I get it. My organization, we're in the middle of that right now. I'm doing something we're called spring cleaning, where we're literally looking at all our processes and systems, identifying gaps, cleaning things up. It's painful.
Yeah,
It's
no, 100%.
fun.
I can imagine.
However, it's critical, right? And I
It's
know that
critical.
at the end of it, it's going to greatly benefit my team, right? And it's
Yeah,
going to greatly
absolutely.
improve people's lives, which makes it
Absolutely.
worthwhile investing the time and the resource to go ahead
Yeah.
and do it. Yeah,
And I
absolutely.
feel like another like so a benefit to it as you're describing is one that it just like it will reduce stress. It could reduce turnover depending on sort of what's going on in your organization. It could provide some safety, I guess, or at least
Mm-hmm.
acknowledgement of individuals that are doing trauma informed work or themselves are working through trauma, and it's not going to become a trigger for them, right? Those are sort of two things. The idea around alleviating stress, and then you
Mm-hmm.
said something about so if that's all happening, you can get the work done. And
Mm-hmm.
what I think about that is that a lot of people, like I remember helping a group, an organization, and they were talking about bureaucracy and infrastructure, and it was about dual entry, like data entry that they were having to do 3 times. Um, and I remember them thinking, like, I just want to go out and do X. Like, I just want to go out and do the job that I wanted to do, right? Or that I'm getting paid to do. I don't want to have to do this administrative stuff, which, yes, we all have stuff in our jobs that we don't want to do. But when it's like 3 times the same information in 3 different databases, of course, they're going to be irritated and frustrated, right? Of course, some of them are thinking, maybe I picked the wrong job if this is what my job is now. So I think there's that piece too around uh, they just want to do their work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's also like, so if they're able to just get their job done, what else are they able to do? And that's that kind of
Mm-hmm.
creativity sort of space that I wanted to address, right? Because I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
we, unfortunately, HR folks like yourselves in the ED position, sometimes our staff might be hearing, well, they want us to be innovative, they want us to be creative. And then we're like, well, how the hell are we supposed to be creative and innovative if I've got like 3 different places that I'm supposed to put data in, right? Like, let alone get my actual job done. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so I think that's like to your point about like if you can just fix all this stuff up, it'll reduce stress. It helps with in terms of trauma informed approaches. Um, and it just lets you just sort of feel free, not just to do your work, but yeah, maybe to think of other ways of doing stuff that's in that creative, innovative space.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, what are some things I think I'm curious about some stuff that you've started to do or that you've tried that you feel like our viewers would benefit from either trying or thinking about in terms of infrastructure and sort of changing things up, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, we use a lot of tools, right? Like I use a lot of tools in our organization. And let me just say real quick for those
Yeah.
viewing, we got a little bit of delay. Don't worry about it. I just want to point it out, just in case folks were like, "What's going on?" It's not your computer. It's okay. It's just Jody has a little bit of a delay,
Yeah,
but
it's not you, it's me.
right. So it's not your computer. It's okay. So yeah, so let me say, so I run a completely remote organization, right? We're completely and totally remote. We always have been, right? So this is not a COVID thing. My organization was always remote. We're also national. So my team is all over the country. So it's all kinds of time zones. We got all the time zones. My board is in all the time zones. The members of our organization, all the time zones. So, being fully remote, always fully remote organization brings with it other kinds of infrastructure challenges, right? So,
Mhm.
so I just want to make it clear. So when I'm talking about certain things, I just want to kind of provide the context of why we do certain things, et cetera, et cetera. So
Yeah.
because we are fully remote, that means it's critical that everything be digitized, right? Like that we be
Mm,
able to everything. That we have very little paper because paper doesn't make sense for an
right.
organization like ours. So we had to think about. So okay, so let me start. I'll give an example of a
Yeah.
thing, kind of a change that was made when I first came in. So we used to have a home office, so we had a home office and we had an office manager in the home office. When I first came on, like I said, it was two and three quarter staff, right? Me full time, another full time person, and the office manager was three-quarter time. So the way that they used to handle bookkeeping and accounting and the monthly book close, this is how they used to do it. So they had a accounting consultant, like an individual, just an individual person who was an accountant, and the office manager would photocopy everything, right? Like all the statements, like it would be a
Mhm.
thick photocopy. And the office manager would drop all this stuff off on this person's office. And they looked through everything. I mean, it was just a hot mess, right? It was just a hot mess process. I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, there's no way. Like, this is insanity. Especially, yeah, because then it was harder for me to kind of see stuff and sign off on stuff, et cetera, because I was not at the home office. I was in a whole nother state. It was just a hot mess system. So, one of the first things I did was to look for an accounting firm,
Mm,
um, a nonprofit accounting firm specifically that to outsource accounting, right? So that was one of the first things I decided to do was to outsource our accounting and
nice.
bookkeeping. And we actually use a firm called Jitasa, and that's
Okay.
all they do. It's all they do. So they know how
Nice.
to do it. They have the systems, they do it very well. And we've been working with them ever since, right? So, so now, we were able to handle everything, online, right? There's no paper, it's much more efficient. And it took some things off of my plate, it took some things off the office manager's plate
Mhm.
because these accountants handle everything. Like they handle all the closeouts, they have access to the accounts they need to have access so they can do their close out the books at the end of the month. They also handle our 990 filing. So that's one example, right? Like I
Nice.
figured that we needed to because sometimes you need to outsource, right? Like
Yeah.
depending on your size, right? Like if you're a
Yeah.
small organization with a fairly small to middling budget, chances are you don't need in-house accountant.
Mhm.
There are
Mhm.
firms
Yeah.
for that, right? Like there are
Yeah.
whole
For sure.
firms that do nothing but that, right?
Yeah.
And also don't do it. I mean, I wouldn't suggest doing it, right? Like I know there's some organizations where the EDs like doing that stuff. Oh my God. I couldn't even. But
Yeah. Yeah.
it's one of
But I
those
guess
things.
in
And it's
that
not
case,
that expensive. It's actually not
no,
that
fair enough.
expensive.
Yeah. I guess
Yeah.
that there is that picking and choosing of capability and capacity, right? So, like you said, you you're more than capable of doing it, but you kind of want to protect your capacity. So you'd rather, like in your case for your organization, it's been you've delegated or you have a contractor or not for profit doing it. What did you call it? It's
It's
you've
called Jitasa. The
Jatasa.
organization is
So you have,
Jitasa.
yeah, but you might have colleagues or peers that like you said, there's some EDs that like to do it. So for them, it's, I guess they're looking at their capacity in a way that results in them still doing it. And then maybe there's other things that they might want to shift then,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
And
they're
in your
yeah.
case, you you're more than capable, but you'd rather not, right?
Well, I'm
Like,
not really that capable either, to be honest. I'm not an accountant.
oh,
Yeah,
okay. You know, it's
I'm
funny
not
that
an
you said
accountant.
that because you're
I am
talking about
not an accountant.
accounting and not.
I am
I'm
not an
like,
accountant.
as you said, I forget what you said, but you used a code or something. I'm like, I got no clue what you're talking about. Like, I'm in
Oh,
HR. But anyhow,
yeah.
yeah, fair enough.
So that was one thing. We also, this is another thing. We use something called bill.com to
Okay.
pay all of our bills, right? And also to handle the signing of checks and things, right? Because once
Okay.
again, we're a fully remote team. So the notion of mailing checks around the world, like that's ridiculous. Who's doing that?
Yeah, for
Right? Like
sure.
we're not doing that. So it's handled, bill.com handles all that stuff. You can do your invoicing through them, you can pay vendors through them, you can pay contractors through them. They will mail out a paper check. They also have a mechanism so that people could get e-payments, and it
Hmm.
allows you can set up your protocol around approval processes and signatory processes, so that
Nice.
I've got my deputy director in California approving things, and I'm signing off in Illinois, all of these
Yeah.
things electronically, right? And also then it's easy for the accountants to go into bill.com when they're
Yeah.
closing out books to see, all of those, those expenditures and things, right? So that's another thing, right? So there are lots of things like that. I also use a
Sure.
payroll and benefit service called Gusto, and they
Okay.
coordinate all of the payroll, including the onboarding, like the initial onboarding of employees.
Mhm.
Because once again, I
Oh,
have employees in every single state,
yeah.
not every single state, but I've got employees in each region of the country.
Yeah. So they
Each
handle that
state
piece as well. Yeah.
Exactly, because each state has different, processes and regulations around
Yeah.
hiring people
Yeah.
in the state. Gusto manages those things.
That's
Gusto makes
awesome.
sure that the monthly filings are handled, that the
Yeah.
benefits are synced up with payroll, that time off is synced up. So it's tools like this, right? Like it's things like this that I
Mhm.
found over time that
Yeah.
greatly, greatly improve our ability to function as a fully remote organization. And for some
Yeah.
of you, even if you're not fully remote, some of these, would still be a good idea, just to kind of simplify processes and make it easier to do certain
Yeah.
things that may be taking a lot of time and energy.
Yeah.
Um,
For
yeah, so
sure.
those, and I may at some point do a video that kind of digs more deeply. If so, here's what I'll say in the comments. If you have a specific thing, right? Like if you want to learn more about a tool, or if you have a question, drop it in the
Yeah.
comments, and at some point I may do a video just doing a deeper dive into
Sure.
some of these tools, right? If that's
Yeah.
something that folks are really interested in learning more about.
And
But
learning more. I
yeah,
I'd love to
that's how we
hear
do it.
about. Yeah, I would love to hear about. So thank you for sharing those examples. The last one you shared, the gusto, I saw there being multiple benefits, right? Because now there's an HR piece that they're picking up in
Yep,
addition to the
yep.
other stuff that they're picking up. So again, that's
Hmm.
one less thing for either you or someone on your team to have to think about because that one piece is getting taken care of. When you and I were prepping for this video, you had mentioned something that I think is sort of important to, not sort of, it's important to mention, and it's around culture. And I
Hmm.
appreciate the context that you provided around part of your organization and the culture is that it's remote, right? And so it matters in terms of recognizing how do you get stuff done. And so
Hmm.
the context that you shared is important because how you get stuff is going to be different. Sorry, how you get stuff done, i.e., your culture, behaviors, what you use in terms of infrastructure may or may not work for others, right?
Exactly,
So I
exactly.
think what's cool is that in the comments, as you said, if there's folks that are looking for more specifics around tools that you've used or ideas that I might have, I think it'd be cool to hear. Well, what are other folks? What are they
Yes,
doing when it comes
exactly.
to
Yeah, what
like
are you doing?
the
Yeah.
infrastructure piece, right? Like, and even as a quick example, like, are they using SharePoint in Teams, right, to more easily edit documents, share documents, that kind of thing? One of the organizations I work for, they use DocuSign, I think it's called, for the
Hmm.
contracts between myself as a
Hmm.
contractor and them, and they find that super easy. Versus, I remember back in the day, had to be written out and then you mailed it, and
Hmm. Or
so I think it might be,
faxing,
yeah.
faxing.
Oh my God. I even have trouble scanning nowadays, even though I'm using my phone. I still have problems with that. But yeah, it would be cool to hear from folks around what are they doing in that infrastructure space,
Yeah.
that they find is really working. And then, as you said, if there's folks that are looking for more information, please do add that into the comments as well. And we between Lina and I, one of us will be happy to elaborate either through video, or I guess it would be through video, right, Lina?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like it. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Do you want to sign off for us?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think I think hopefully this was a helpful conversation. As I said, it's really kind of the start of a conversation, because there are things that we can certainly kind of dive into more if folks are interested into hearing more about, any specific pieces, specific tools, etc. So yeah, as we've said, please share questions you may have in the comments or tips, right? Because this is a community that's about sharing resources, right? And trying to make sure that we're supporting one another so that all of us, are getting there together, right? In terms of figuring out how to do this important work we're doing in ways that are sustainable for ourselves and for our teams. Please like the video, turn on the notifications. Our plan is to release a new video every Saturday. So please turn on the notifications so that you don't miss a video. And as I said, there's some other videos. If this is your first one that you're seeing, we've got a couple other videos before this that also are kind of addressing similar pieces of this kind of content, if this is something that you're interested in. So yeah, stay tuned for our next video. And you'll also see in the description, as I said, there will be links to, like the video that I mentioned earlier. And also you can check out we do have a community that we're starting called Cypher. You can find more information about that, as well as links if you're potentially interested in working with myself or Jodi. You'll find those links in the description as well. So, we hope to see you next time. And hopefully, as I said, this was a helpful conversation for folks.
Awesome.
All right. Till
Yeah,
next time.
Yeah.